bed. So my apologies for that. I was online since 5 o'clock and unfortunately was just sitting in the wrong room. Yeah, how are you all doing? Are you all well?
We're well, thank you.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Okay, so I know I realize, of course, we've lost quite a bit of time. That is my fault. So I am going to see how much we can get in this particular session, and I'm not going to rush through it, but I am going to try to ensure that we stay within the time limit that we have. Okay. So, okay, I think for the sake of purpose of time, I'm not going to go through this, but just for the benefit of those who watch the recording, just to highlight that we do have one-on-one consultations available, and those really will help if there's anything particular that we've not been able to cover in the sessions. And you're welcome to schedule a one-on-one consultation with myself. And I've just put now in the chat the link to the attendance register. So if everyone can please so long just click on that, fill in those details. Okay, so sorry, I think that's this should be session 3 actually. My apologies for that. Session 3 for facilitation of research skills for second years, and the applicable modules are RSE 2601 and RCE 2601. Okay, so I think just to recap really quickly on what we talked about last week, we really looked at the concept of critical reasoning, particularly as it pertains to our academic writing. So we asked the question like, what is critical reasoning, and why is it important? Not just for our studies, but just why is it important in general? Okay, and then we looked at sort of the concept of logic as a sort of sub-element of critical reasoning. We said that logic really is the essence of academic writing, meaning that really you're writing, and we also said that we want to apply this not just to our writing, because we may not necessarily have many opportunities to write in undergrad, to write research papers in undergrad, but it also helps us to get a sense of when we are reading academic texts, which we will be doing lots of, to be able to follow this format of logic and to ensure that what we read makes sense, so that we're able to understand it on a deeper level. So in terms of the writing aspect, we said that as long as the writing is logical and that it sort of conforms to the correct standards in terms of structure and language and all of those technical requirements, then you're sort of the battle is half won essentially. And so we talked about the importance of logical structure in academic writing. And then we sort of looked at the elements of critical reasoning. And we said that really the essence of logic is to develop an argument in which a series of statements are made on the basis of which a conclusion can be made. So the elements within this were looked at as validity, or the truth of each premise. So we said that every statement that is presented must be true, must be valid, and then that a particular conclusion that is made must support the statements that have been made. So we gave lots of examples last week, and I'm not going to go through all the examples, but I do hope that we still remember sort of the analogy of, you know, taking your reader by the hand and walking them through your reasoning to get to a conclusion where the reader actually understands and sees where you're coming from in terms of where you're coming from, where your reasoning is coming from, where, and can sort of believe your writing, as in it's credible, your writing is credible. So those are the two elements that we looked at. And then we also said that oftentimes you'll get to if your statements and your conclusions do not link, or if there's no sort of logical link between the things that you have said, because your statements are what build your argument or build the thesis that you're the thesis statement that you're trying to put forth. If there's a disconnect between your statement and your conclusion, it throws off your writing, and this also leads to a lot of what we call fallacies or comment fallacies. And so we looked at some of them. There were quite a lot. We looked at the fallacies around, and we talked about how these really come up so much in some of our writing, where you use very emotional language, or you make these generalizations, you appeal to authority incorrectly, or people use too much jargon, so too many highly technical terms that sort of throws off your argument, or making ambiguous statements. So all of the elements that we looked at, the common fallacies that we looked at, really weaken a particular argument. So that is some of the things that we looked at. And then ultimately we sort of ended it off by looking at what is the implication of logic and critical reasoning for academic writing. So yes, we talked about really being able to connect your statements, ensuring that they are accurate, and followed sort of the ABC framework as a sort of a checklist to ensure that your writing is solid, but not just your writing. As I said, we can also use it for when we are engaging with text, as in consuming and reading text, to be able to critically analyze those texts for things like accuracy, which is A, brevity, which is B, and clarity, which is C. So having an accurate, brief, and clear sort of argument really will make for good academic writing, and the ability to critically analyze academic text. So that is sort of what we covered last week in brief. And now I think I want us to have this at the back of our minds as we sort of step into this week's topic. And I did hear some of the feedback that there is a need for sort of more content-based sessions. So again, I must just reiterate that we're going to be looking at some content in the RSC 2601 study guide today, but I really want us to take what we've learned around the skills of analyzing text and reading for comprehension, and try to apply it to this, and really apply our minds to what we're going to be looking at going forward. It really should not be just a case of consuming and intaking information, but I really want us to get to the point where we are critically engaging with the material that we are consuming. Okay. So are we all good with that? Are we happy with the recap and sort of how we got to this point? Okay. So we're going to just move on to today's session, and you can follow along with me. I would recommend that you have your study guide open as well. And really what I'm going to try to do is bring to life some of the concepts that we are looking at, and see how we can try to apply them. Because again, it's not just about taking in the information, it's also about making it make sense, so that element of logic, making it make sense, analyzing it in for ourselves so that we get to a deeper understanding of it. All right. So we're looking at research, and last week and the week before we sort of started touching on research, the research process, sort of the importance of research, and how we got to this point, in society where research, particularly in the social sciences, plays such an important role, right? So before we even sort of start off, we are sort of tasked with looking at science, like what is science? And so we're told that science is really a process of inquiry, right? A way of learning and knowing things about the world around us. And this is something, I'll stop there, because this is something that we are doing all the time, right? In our daily lives, we're always trying to find ways of understanding the world and the things that are happening around us. So if there's a green light at the robots, there's a green light, but the cars aren't moving, what's the first thing that you would do? So there's a queue of cars, the light, the robot, I mean, is green, but no one. Hi everyone, apologies for that. My laptop just died. Okay, yes. Yes, sorry, Nazreen, I actually I lost network. Well, not network, my laptop died. Okay, so we're talking about a green light. So what's the first thing that you would do then?
Sorry, if you would do, if what about the green light? Could you cut off midway?
Okay, sorry. So I was saying, if you are at a traffic, you're in traffic, and you are maybe the fourth car, and then the light obviously was red, so everyone stopped, and then the light turns green. So we know that for when the light turns green, we're having to move, but then the cars in front of you aren't moving. What's sort of your first reaction when that happens?
I would look about and check why the cars in front of me aren't moving and see somebody broke down. That's why they can't move. And yeah, that's what I would do.
Exactly. Thanks, Nazreen. So yes, essentially the first thing is you're wanting to almost problem solve to figure out why. You would first ask yourself, okay, now why aren't we moving? What's happening? You'll check, okay, the guy in front, like, is something happening with him? You'll maybe like stick your head out the car, or people will start hooting because the norm tells us that we have to move, but if we're not moving, it means something's wrong. And so this, again, in that small act, it's actually a way that we're trying to learn and know about the world. We're trying to understand what's happening. That in itself is a process of inquiry. Now, the difference between something like that and science is that we're not necessarily, is that science uses logic, observation, and theory. In that situation, you're kind of just using logic and observation. You're like, wait, we should have moved, we're not moving, logic. You start looking around, observation, to try to get information about why we're not moving. But of course, you're not trying to apply some sort of theory to it and, you know, and go through a very systematic process to understand why we're not moving. It doesn't require that. But science asks us to go through a very systematic process to make sense of the things that are happening around us. So we try to make sense of it. We have a reference point or an observed evidence, and then we try to give an explanation for what we have observed, right? So of course, even in the car example, if you notice that, oh, you notice that, oh, the guy right in front, his car broke down, that's sort of an explanation about what's happening there. But of course, science goes a little bit more in depth. So that is this process of inquiry that we are sort of tasked with, that we do it every day, but but with science, we do it at a more structured level. And then we go into the concept of research. And what is research? If you just think of the words itself, we are told it's sort of broken down into two words, meaning to repeat or to do again, and search, of course, to when you're looking for something. So research, essentially, we're just taking another look. We're looking again. And the second look is generally a deeper look, right? It's generally a more, I don't want to say intense, because it's not necessarily intense, but it's a lot more intentional. If I just think of, you know, I walk down the road, I see a very cute dog, maybe. The first look, I just look, oh, cute dog. But if I look again, it means that something had caught my eye about, maybe I noticed that it had a particular color. So now I'm looking again, but I'm looking very specifically at a particular thing on that dog. So we're taking another look, right? But of course, it's a more careful and planned study of this, whatever social phenomena we're looking at. So essentially, scientific research means that we are systematically examining and thinking about a question, and the question would be around, in our context, would be a sort of a social phenomena or something that's happening in the world around us. Okay. Hope we're all happy with that. So going back to sort of the way that we try to understand the world. Sorry, let me go back. The way we try to understand the world, there are multiple ways that we try to, and that we have come to learn about the world. Before we go into the different ways, can I just get a sense from you guys? What are the different ways that you have come to learn about things around you? How do you know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west? How do you know when you wake up, you brush your teeth first? How do you know that when people get married, that the families must come together? How do we know about the world around us? You're welcome to put things in the chat as well. Okay, so I see that Raja is saying through experience. So actually going through something teaches you about the world, being told, okay, learning about it. I'm assuming you mean like in school. Amber says it is taught to us from a young age. But But even as we are adults, right, we're learning things every day. So how are we learning about these new things? Through observation by people in society. We learn from observing those around us. So far we have, that we are told. Who tells us things? We are told. So far we are told. So far we learn, and I'm assuming that is through like education. We have experience. We have observation. We're observing those around us, and in that way we learn. We can be shown to us by friends, family, and the internet. New things are brought to our awareness through advertising. So the media. So I think amazing. So I think we can already see that we are always consuming information, right? We learn things. We learn about the world from different sources, and so in the context of research, it is important to, as a researcher, to sort of be mindful of all the different avenues that we gain information, because a lot of that information actually sets the tone for how you will conduct your research, for the things that you will conduct in your research, right? So we are told about reading documentaries, right? So different sources. So we are then sort of introduced, and I hope that you guys are following along in your notes, that we are introduced to the different sources of general knowledge, right? General knowledge being just things that are kind of well known, well established, well accepted as truth. And there are different ways and different sources that we get general knowledge. I mean, we're all sitting with a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge that we have learned from different places. So one of the first ones that we are introduced to is tradition. So we are told that we all inherit a culture which contains accepted knowledge and ways of the world. This means that we accept what other people know and tell us. So if you grew up in a Muslim family, you would from a young age know that these are certain customs, these are certain things that you need to do to conduct yourself as a Muslim, right? So tradition, you're told by your family, your grandparents, the people around you that, you know what, this is our culture. That's how we learn about culture. Through tradition is one of the ways that we learn about, and it's not just about culture, right? So your parents won't just teach you about how to be a Muslim, but they'll also teach you how to be conduct yourself as a man in the world or as a female in the world, how to conduct yourself as a citizen of a particular country, so all tradition, so all these ways are things, or all of these things are ways in which we receive information from other people. And most of the times we tend to accept tradition, right? Especially when we're young, because of where it's coming from. If it's coming from our parents, we tend to accept that because we believe that our parents have authority and know what they're talking about. We only find that it's later in life that some of us will start questioning things about tradition and saying, okay, but why must it be that way, And then that becomes a very interesting process of knowledge and sort of, knowledge construction, but we won't go into that. Just to say that tradition is the first source of general information. The second is authority. And the authority is, of course, when we sort of just accept something or accept information because of where it's coming from. And this, as you will sort of see, it ties in quite nicely with tradition. So like I said, if the information is coming from your family, you trust your family, you trust your father. So because my dad said it, I will believe it. But maybe if someone else who I don't really know, who I don't really care about, came and told me this thing, the same thing, for the first time, I might be a bit skeptical, right? Because I feel like this person doesn't have the authority to speak on it. So we basically accept information, sometimes unconsciously, just because of the person who's telling us that information, just because of the source from which it's coming from. So we are relying not necessarily at the information. We're not judging the actual content of the information that they're telling us. We're judging it on the basis of who the person is telling us. So if the Minister of Police comes and tells us something about, crime that we might not know, we'll probably believe him because we're like, yeah, I mean, he's the Minister of Police. Obviously, he knows about these things, right? So we feel that he has the authority to speak on that particular thing. The next one is mysticism and religion. And when religion is often offers a type of knowledge based on the authority of sacred texts. So you have like the Bible or the Quran and some other supernatural sources, or the Torah for the Jews. So this also provides us a way of understanding life, understanding our role, and understanding why things are as they are, understanding the way that we need to conduct ourselves. So yes, we can see that these sources of information aren't exclusive to one another, right? They sort of all intercept and interchange, because often religion, how are you going to know about religion, right? It's most likely going to be in your family, right? It's most likely going to form part of the tradition of your family, which is, the authority of your father or the authority of your mother. When they pass this information to you, you accept it as truth. And then we have common sense, and common sense is sort of this form of reasoning that relates to what people know intuitively, as in it just makes sense. So you're not always able to explain it. I mean, some things you can. For example, I know if I'm crossing the road and I see a car coming, I'm going to wait, right? I'm not going to cross the road, even if it is a red light. So it's a red light, I know the cars must stop, but I see a car racing down the road. I'm not going to say, oh no, because it's a red light, he must stop, I'm going to walk across the road. Like, common sense is going to tell me, wait, just wait for this car to pass. And sometimes your intuition will tell you if you can trust someone or not. That is something that you can't fully explain. But yeah, intuition is also a form of common sense that is a little just that it's a little bit difficult to fully explain. Like when you meet someone, you're just like, there's just something about this person. I can't put my finger on it, but I feel like there's something funny about them. I can't trust them, or I can trust them. I feel, this person has a certain energy. So yeah, common sense is another source of general knowledge. And then we have medium. And I did see the media coming up a lot. Of course, in this age, we are bombarded with the media. We are bombarded with information on social media, on TV, on the internet, from all places. And so and of course, in this age of fake news, I think I almost want to say give Donald Trump props for normalizing the word fake news, because it really highlights how the media can feed us false information. And I don't know if before that we were truly aware of the level of myths and things that we consume from the media that are not necessarily true. A lot of the times we take what you see and we take it at face value. And so media myths is essentially, of course, when people learn about the world and develop their concept of social reality based on what they see, hear, and read in the media. It begins to inform our, the way that we see the world. I mean, I remember when I was younger, we used to think of America as this land of milk and honey, right? It was this amazing place we all wanted to go, because that is what the media at that time was showing us, like this, that it's this amazing place. And as things have evolved, we began to see a lot more nuances about America as a country, a lot of the issues. And now we sort of have, okay, maybe I'll speak for myself. I have more of a negative perception of it, right? But again, that perception has been based on the media, because I don't know anyone. Okay, I don't have a very personal connection or relationship with anyone from and in America. So all the information that I know about America is from the news. So when it turns positive, it was because of what the media showed us, and when it turned negative, it's because of what the media showed us. So yeah, that just to highlight how the media really does influence the way that we view our social reality. Okay. Yeah, intuition is your instinct, essentially. Yes. And Razia is laughing there. Is it about the fake news? Fake news is a big thing, and I think what it's done is really forced us to question what we're reading, question the sources of even the WhatsApp messages that are floating around. I always tell people, don't send me these chain messages, because I don't know where it's coming from. How can I validate or that it's from a credible source? How do I know the information is true? And I think a lot of that thinking has come as a result of me being a researcher. Is now I can't just accept things as they come. I sort of have to always question and ask myself, is this true? Is the source true? Are these facts valid? Etc. Okay, so we're moving on to errors in human inquiry. And before we get into that, I think I just want to highlight about the sources of general knowledge. The reason that we highlight them in a course like research is because what we know about the world will inform the way that we will do research, will inform the kind of research that we will do. And it's important to note beyond that, okay, these are the different ways that we come to know knowledge, but that these ways can also lead to misunderstandings about social reality, right? They can lead to stereotypes, misconceptions about certain things, about certain people, and that leads essentially to errors in human inquiry. So if I'm walking with this assumption that America is this amazing place, and I want to do research about it, for example, I'm already walking in to that research with a particular perspective that is flawed, right? Which means everything that I'm going to do from that research is somehow going to be flawed because of the incorrect perception that I am walking into it with. I hope that connection comes out clearly. So we are introduced to various areas of human inquiry, and areas of human inquiry just means the mistakes that we make when we are trying to understand the world around us. And this can either be in the formal research space, but it can also be in our everyday lives. I think as we go through it, you'll see the different ways that we, even in our everyday inquiry or human inquiry, will make errors or make certain judgments which are not necessarily true. Okay, so for the first one is inaccurate observation. And so with inaccurate observation in the context of research is that we need to know what before we can explain why, right? And by that I mean we need to know what we are studying. What is it exactly that you are trying to research before you can explain why this thing is happening? So, okay, going back to the traffic light example, and the car is not moving at the green light. You need to know the what is sorry, yes, I think we need to first understand what is it exactly that I'm trying to observe here? What is it that I'm trying to figure out, right? It's not that I'm not trying to figure out that the light is green. That's not the what. I'm not trying to figure out, okay, maybe I'm not trying to figure out necessarily why I'm not moving because the light is green, because there are other cars in front of me, right? The what in that case would be, why is the first car not moving? Because that first car sort of will set the tone for everyone else. If the first car can't move, no one else can move. So our what would be, why is the first car not moving? I don't care what's happening to the second car. Or I don't care what's happening to, or maybe actually, sorry, I think that reasoning is a bit flawed, because the first car could have gone, but if the second car is blocked, okay. So, right? So again, even that, me trying to sort of figure out a what, shows how important it is to know what exactly you're studying. I'm sorry, I'm going to just delete that example because I couldn't see it through. But I hope it is clear that we understand what is happening, and what exactly in a particular topic you're studying. Okay, I think I have a good example. Please bear with me here. If we're studying something like the effect of drug abuse in a particular community, the what that I'm studying is the effects of drug abuse in the community. But what an inaccurate observation would be is if I, as a researcher, went in and I just started looking at drug use in general, right? I'm like, oh, so these are the drugs people are using. This is how much drugs people are using. This is how people get the drugs. This is who is using the drugs. Those are all important, but the what is the effect of drugs on the community, not just drugs in the community. I hope that one is a bit clearer. So the what, so in the inaccurate observation there would be me looking at the wrong thing. It's within the same theme, but I'm looking at the wrong thing. I'm just looking at drugs in general, drug use. I'm not looking at the effect of the drugs, because I would have to ask very different questions if I'm looking at the effect of drugs on that community. I hope that one is clear. I think in my head that one makes a lot more sense. Okay, next is, but please let me know if it doesn't, so we can try to figure it out together some more. But I'm going to move on to overgeneralization. And this is, I think, not a new term to us. It's something that we're quite aware of, is that you make judgments based on having sort of observed a certain number of instances, and then you make a sort of a conclusion based on that. So if an intern comes late to work for the first day, and then he comes late to the second day, you make the judgment that, oh, this intern is always late, he's always lazy, right? Or he's always late, or he's lazy. And so you make these kinds of judgments, or these types of overgeneralization, which were not maybe always the truth. What if on the third day he actually comes early, and then the fourth day he comes early, and he's early every day for the next 5 years? You know, would that initial generalization, that initial judgment, be accurate? No, it wouldn't, right? And so we are taught, our attention is drawn to a different type of overgeneralization, which is called the halo effect. And essentially the halo effect is when we, again, it is a form of overgeneralization, but this time it's more of a positive one. So you see something positive about someone or a situation, and you sort of overgeneralize the level of positivity of this thing. So, for example, a school produces really good grades, or the matric in a particular school produces really good grades for 2 years in a row. Then you sort of make the generalization. The halo effect would then say that you say, oh, wow, the school is an excellent school. This is a top-notch school. Only on those sort of the brief observation that they produced good grades for 2 years in a row. So you sort of judge everything that they're going to do now based on the fact that, oh, but they produced really good grades. So if someone, the implication of that is that you as a researcher or as a person would not be open to information that comes in that is contrary to the conception that the conception that you now have of the school. So if someone comes along and says, oh, that school is really bad, like the teachers don't really care about the students, you will not be open to that information, that new information, because you have already painted the school sort of in this particular way, right? The halo, if you just think of a halo, it's like an angel, right? So you sort of see them in this positive light. Nothing bad can be said about them. Okay, so that's the overgeneralization, and then we looked at the halo effect as a form of overgeneralization. Okay, next is selective observation. And so overgeneralization basically can lead to selective observation. So I think the term is quite self-explanatory. So, selective observation, you essentially just select what you want to fit a particular narrative. So if we continue with the halo effect example about that particular school, when the information comes to you, or if information comes to you that is contrary to the idea that you have built about the school, you will decide to actually not take that on, right? So you begin to select what you want to hear or what you want to accept about the school. And this is dangerous in research, because if you are doing research on schools in Cape Town and you have this perception about this particular school, and as you're collecting data, new information comes in that are against or negative or contrary to what you have believed about the school. In research, you then decide you're not going to include that in your data, or you decided you're not going to include that in your findings. That leads to inaccurate research, or sort of, flawed research, because you failed to consider all the observable facts or all the evidence on this particular thing, right? I hope we are all good with that. Next is we look at ego involvement in understanding. And so ego involvement in understanding is really just how do you as a researcher find yourself in your research, right? So usually our understanding of events and conditions is psychologically significant to us most of the times, almost 90% of the times. When people undertake a research in a particular topic, they have some sort of connection to that research. So if I'm doing a research on drug use in a particular community, it's almost like, of course, this is a topic that is dear to me, right? So it could be that I grew up in a community where drug was really rife, and I saw the damages, and now I want to do research as a way to find solutions, or I know someone who is affected by drug use, or something, right? So psychologically, there's always some sort of significance to the research topics that we choose. And I always say that research topics find us. We don't actually choose them. They find us because they most of the times reflective of something that's happened to us, or something that's happened to the people around us, or something that's just happened in our environment. Okay, so what ego involvement does is, ego involvement as an error in human inquiry is that because the research is significant to us somehow, we already have a preconceived notion or idea about this, right? And most of the time you'll sort of have an idea of what the results would be, what the outcomes would be. And so when you're presented with information that does not necessarily match up with your initial thoughts or your initial understanding of this topic, you can then, as a researcher, that leads to something like selective observation, where you decide to not include it, right? So your ego basically now plays starts to get in the way of you fully understanding this situation, because you thinking, no, but this was the reason, has always been the reason, right? But the information is saying that actually the data is saying something else. So that's how ego involvement can play a role in human inquiry, or can lead to errors. And then finally, we have the premature closing of inquiry. Again, sort of self-explanatory, but it really is this notion where the researcher sort of feels that they have all the information that they need to make solid judgment on a particular situation and decide to stop collecting data on it, right? So again, it goes back to something like selective observation. If I've decided I've got 10 cases of a yes, I want to close it at 10 because I don't want to risk the 11th one being a no, because what that means is because that has implications for the findings of my research. And so you will find that researcher will sometimes close or stop the inquiry too soon because of fear that something might come and sort of distort the findings and their understanding of it. Okay. Are there any questions around that? So do we see how even the sources of general knowledge, the way that we have come to know of the world, can and the things that we then walk into research with can hinder our research, can lead to errors in human inquiry, right? I hope that comes across closely. Okay, I see a question. Do you think we overgeneralize while looking at reviews on Takealot? His approach is based on other, I don't, but yeah, I would say that is a form of overgeneralization, especially when you have only limited data to work with, right? So if you have only 8 reviews and they're all saying positive things, I guess you sort of make the generalization that, okay, this is a positive, this product is good, and then I will buy the product. I don't think you're alone there, Nazreen. I think we all really make use of reviews to make decisions. So yes, it is a form of generalization, not necessarily a bad one. Okay. All right, so I think that we are all following along in our study guides. So in the next section we're looking at the norms of the scientific community, and the importance of looking at the norms is to say, and I want us to sort of follow the reasoning here, right, from all the topics that we were talking about today. Follow the reasoning. So we've come to understand knowledge in different ways. The ways that we've come to understand knowledge has some flaws which will lead to errors in human inquiry, right? Errors in the way that we understand things and in the way that will conduct our research. So enter scientific norms. The scientific norms basically will serve as a, what can I say? What's the word? As a buffer against the errors, because we don't want, of course, errors are inevitable because we are human and we are always going to make mistakes. But essentially in scientific research, because it is structured, because it is a systematic process, the community sort of has gathered together and say, how can we limit the number of errors in research, in scientific research? How do we limit, how can we prevent overgeneralizations? Or how can we limit selective observation? How can we limit inaccurate observations, right? So the scientific norms have then been developed as ways of enforcing rules of conduct in the research space. So like I said, it gives us a guideline. So just as any behavior in any community is regulated by social norms, so the scientific community is governed by these norms that researchers learn and internalize as an essential part of their training. So by understanding things like universalism and organized skepticism, disinterestedness, communalism, and honesty, the researcher can somehow counter some of the errors that they would be some of the errors that they would make in their inquiry, right, or in their research, just as a result of being human and having understood the world in a particular way. Okay, so these are some of the scientific norms that we are, or not, yeah, these are the scientific norms that we are introduced to in our notes. So it's universalism, organized skepticism, disinterestedness, communalism, and honesty. So for this one, I think I would like us to all read through it. It is on page 12. Read through it. I'll give us about 5 to 10 minutes, and then I'd like everyone to choose one and just give us a one-liner about what it's about. Okay, is everyone happy with that? So we're going to read the scientific norms on page 12, and then you'll choose one. You can put it in the chat, or you can just let us know in one line what it is about. Here, I want us to try to sort of incorporate some of the things we talked about previously when we looked at the skill of sort of engaging critically with our text and trying to summarize. Okay, so it's now 18:15. I think I'll give us till 20 past 5 minutes. Read through it, choose one and put it in the chat what it is in a way that, you know, everyone in the class will understand it and it's quite clear. All right, so we'll resume at 20 past. Okay, it's 20 past. I see some comments are coming in and some of you are still typing, so I'll just give us maybe 2 or 3 more minutes to wrap up the typing and then we'll discuss. Okay, so I think we can start looking at some of the explanations. Okay, so we've got honesty, and as Rain says, honesty. So essentially, results have to be accurate and honest with information to back it up. Example, if you're claiming to have a cure for AIDS, when in fact you do not, making up false results and statistics. So scientists demand honesty, therefore research reports are subjected to the scrutiny of other scientists. Beautiful. Yeah, and really honesty looks the same across all contexts. It's just about being truthful. And so researchers are called to truth, right? Present the facts as you see them, as you have found them. Don't try to alter information. Don't try to present information that is not true. Awesome. Thanks for that, Nazreen. Amber talks about communalism, which means, according to her, that all scientific research should be shared with others because it belongs to everyone. All scientific knowledge should be expressed to the public and it should be made available for public to access freely. Also, research should be described in detail. Lovely. And yes, and I think you've captured it really nicely. If we think of communalism, the root word there, or an associated word there, would be community. And community is just about sharing, right? This concept of sharing. So all research must be shared with the community, because if the point of research is to, or if the point of social science research is to solve a social issue, then what's the point of you doing your research and then just hiding it and just keeping it on your laptop, or just keeping it in your library, or just keeping it at the university, right? How is it going to solve the social issue if it's just sitting in a library somewhere? So yes, the norm of communalism tells us that your research needs to be shared because it is for the public. It has been, that research was conducted for public good, therefore it has to be shared with the public so that they can actually make use of it. All right. Disinterestedness. So religious authority might slant the researcher's views, and having to incorporate an opposing view might cause a lack of continuous interest in the data presented, leading to disinterestedness. I see how that could happen, especially when there are opposing views coming in, and people may not be ready to accept opposing views, especially if it is opposing something that you care very strongly about. And so I think what disinterested in is asking us is to not have any particular interest in the topic, or not to be biased in a way on that topic. So if it is a religious leader and he's reading a paper, and he's a researcher, but he's also a religious leader, and he's reading a paper about, let's say, abortion, right? And his religion is against abortion. He's reading a paper that is for abortion, or is presenting information that says abortion has benefit. There are benefits to it. He needs to display disinterestedness in that he must be completely objective about it, and not be, just not show his bias through his as he is reviewing that paper. I hope that is clear. Okay, we've got communalism again. Scientific research that has been conducted needs to be shared with the public. 100%. It must be made public, and it needs to be reviewed by other researchers. All right, we have a new one, universalism, which says that it doesn't matter who or where the research is done, it should be judged scientifically. Yes, we can't discriminate research because it came from a certain country or from a certain individual. Exactly, and this is why you will find that a lot of the times the review of research is often anonymous. Like, they don't tell you who the researcher is, because if it's a big name, you as a reviewer, or you as the person reading it, might be biased towards. You might say, oh, for example, if it's Professor Jonathan Jansen, you might say, oh, this is Prof Jansen's article. You are already going to have a certain bias towards that article because you know the name attached to it. And so universalism is saying, no matter if it's a first-year student's paper versus if it is an established professor's paper, you need to review that research in the same way, objectively, and based on the merit of that paper, not based on the name that is attached to that paper. Okay. We've got organized skepticism, which says all research must be challenged and not accepted blindly. Yes, Essentially, with organized skepticism, you're going in and you're being skeptical of everything. I attended a research seminar once, and they told us, when you read research papers, question everything, question every sentence. and it seems a bit extreme, but that's what organized skepticism is asking us. It's asking us to be skeptical about everything that this person has written. Is this true? Has this been backed up? Where did he get this information, right? To question everything before you just accept something as truth. Okay, we've got honesty again. Oh, Naomi says honesty might be seen as a norm, but not all research is based on honesty. That's interesting. Maybe you can tell us more about that, Naomi. What do you mean when all research is not all research? Of course, there are cases where it's not, but that is against the norm, right? So, but maybe share a bit with us where that's coming from. Okay, Ahmed has chosen organized skepticism, and it's like, I'm doing research about the crime in my area, and someone said to police it's part of the crime. So my responsibility as a researcher is to investigate until I find concrete evidence. Yes, essentially. So you're not just accepting that because someone said it, right? It needs to be founded based on like evidence, based on facts. Awesome. Universalism again. Research is based on scientific merit, never mind who or what it was conducted, as everyone has the right to share the information. Lovely. Nasreen is saying, so he can't be overly interested. I am assuming you're asking about the disinterestedness. Yes, he can't be overly interested in that topic, right? He needs to sort of be as neutral as possible about it. Because if you're overly interested, it means you already develop a bias towards it. Even if it can even be on the opposite spectrum, if it's something you're totally against, that does not go in line with the norm of disinterestedness, because if you're totally against something, you have a bias against it then, and that is going to affect the way that you review that paper, the way that you accept that research. Okay, thanks everyone for your contributions. I think that we all really have a nice understanding of the scientific norms and the whys and the hows of that. And so I think ultimately what we're saying is that the main way, if we looked at as we read through these concepts, we see that the main way that we can prevent errors in human inquiry is by having our work reviewed. So research reviews are a big part of research. So it goes beyond just you as a researcher conducting your research and being really happy with it and getting a good mark for it. The minute it's out there, it is subject to review, and people are going to pick up if you have a bias in your writing. It will be picked up. If there is a lack of honesty in your writing, it will be picked up, right? Because the people who are reviewing your paper, or the researchers who are reviewing your work, are applying these scientific norms and trying to ensure that they can really judge the research that has been produced on merit and not anything else. Okay. So I think this saves us some time, because we have touched on the stages of research, and we will find that the previous things, the scientific norms that we talked about, right, when we talked about the reviewing of research, this usually comes at the end of the research stage, as we presented it in I think this first session, right? We looked at the 4 stages of research and how sort of it builds on one another. So the unfortunate thing is that when we talked about the errors in human inquiry, those errors happen during the research, right? So from stage 1 to stage 3. this is where the errors are coming in. The selective observation, the inaccurate observation, the premature closure of inquiry. These are happening in stages 1 to 3. But where the errors are only really picked up in stage 4, once we communicate the results. So it's a bit, I'm just thinking of it like in terms of a researcher. I would ideally want these errors to be picked up before I publish my paper, right? Before I put it out for the world to see. And of course, this does happen with when you're conducting research. Most of the time, you will have a supervisor who is reviewing your work. So before you publish the final thing, so that helps. But generally, that review of the research and where the scientific norms are applied usually happens at the end. So I think I just wanted to point that out here. We're not going to go through the stages of research because we have looked at them already, but just to see how where what we've just talked about sort of fits in. Okay. So then we go on to get into the notions of ontology and epistemology. And I have to admit that when I was in undergrad, I hated these two terms and they came up everywhere. It's like that one thing that you try to avoid that you just can't run away from. And so, yeah, it is, they are concepts that as researchers, we need to be quite familiar with and understand quite well. And so ontology and epistemology really gives us a framework for, again, the way that we view the world and the way that we come to understand the world. So a part of what we looked at under the sources of general knowledge, a part of what we came to understand with the sources of general knowledge is that there are different ways that we come to know knowledge, and then that results in our different perceptions about the world. So a Muslim man from Cape Town will have a different perspective or perception of the world to a Xhosa girl from KZN, right? Sorry, a Zulu girl from KZN. I must get that right. So yes, as you've seen, in the way and the information and the way that we get this information, of course, will affect or sort of will inform the way that we move through the world. And this is sort of the core basis of ontology and epistemology. And they are two distinct concepts, but they sort of speak to one another. So first with ontology is ontology, and I'm just reading from the slides now. Ontology is a branch of philosophy dealing with the nature of reality. So the nature of reality is just, how do you see the world? What do you think about the world? So ontological assumptions are assumptions that refer to what the researcher thinks exists and is real. These ideas are seldom consciously questioned by researchers because they appear so obvious. So an ontological assumption for maybe a Zulu girl is that I must get married, and when I get married, my future husband must pay lobola, right? That's an ontological assumption. That is the way that is her view of marriage. Like that, this concept of marriage is something that firstly must happen, and secondly must happen in a particular way, right? So let's hold that one. That is an ontological assumption. And remember, and I just want to highlight that we are told that it's seldom questioned. So she won't really, growing up as a Zulu girl, she's not going to question this concept of marriage, right? Because it's so embedded in her upbringing. It is so embedded in the way that she, or the way that she has come to know about the world. She's probably received this information in many ways, not just one way, not just through tradition, maybe through religion, maybe through authority, maybe through the media, right? So there's many ways that she has received this information. So she gets to a point where this thing is obvious. There's no two ways about it. It's not something I have to think about. Even the fact of when she gets married, she's going to take her husband's surname. That's not something I need to think about, or she would need to think about, because it just makes sense, like, but this is the way things are, right? So that's our ontological assumptions. And then we move on to epistemology. And epistemology is the branch of philosophy dealing with the nature of knowledge. So epistemological questions deal with how we can know and explain something. So this means we have to decide what types of statement about social reality are permissible, right? So ontology is what we know about social reality, right? Our perception of social reality. Epistemology is how we know about this. How did I come to know about this? How do I know about marriage? How do I explain marriage, you know? So I hope that is clear. And if it's not, we're going to watch a quick YouTube video to break it down a little bit further. And it's a short one, so yes. Are there any questions?
Sorry, excuse me, I just want to clear up that epistemology is it how we know the things that we know?
Sorry, the sound is a bit...
Hello, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to know, epistemology, is it how we know the things we know?
Yes. How? Okay, so I think we've got it, but let's just watch this quick. It's just about 3 minutes. And I think this will just bring it home for us as well.
Doing a research project can be daunting, especially when you have to learn a whole set of new terms. In this video, I will explain the relationship between research paradigm, ontology, and epistemology. In the simplest terms, the following picture describes the relationship between ontology, epistemology, and research paradigm. So what does ontology and epistemology mean? Well, ontology examines the nature of reality, while epistemology examines how you can examine reality. Ontology is interested in addressing the question, what is reality? There are several ontologies that exist. For the purposes of this video, I will use these three ontologies. Firstly, the belief that there is only one single reality or truth. Secondly, the belief that there are multiple realities. Thirdly, that reality is constantly negotiated, debated, or interpreted. Epistemology refers to how an individual understands knowledge, how they understand their own thinking process, and how they think others know. In other words, epistemology addresses the question, how can I know reality? There are several different epistemologies that exist. For the purposes of this video, I will use these three epistemologies. Firstly, the belief that knowledge can be measured using reliable designs and tools. Secondly, the belief that reality needs to be interpreted to discover the underlying meaning. Thirdly, that knowledge should be examined using whatever tools are best suited to solve the problem. When you combine your ontology and epistemology together, you are able to get a holistic view of how you understand knowledge. This is what we mean when we refer to a research paradigm. Using the three ontologies and three epistemologies I mentioned before, I will now show you how these combine to form the three most common research paradigms in social sciences: positivism, constructivism, and pragmatism. Positivists have the ontology that there is one single reality or truth, and the epistemological stance that knowledge can be measured. In contrast, constructivists believe that there are multiple realities, and the epistemological stance that knowledge needs to be interpreted to discover the underlying meaning. Finally, pragmatists believe that reality is constantly negotiated, debated, or interpreted, and the epistemological stance that knowledge should be examined using whatever tools are best suited to solve the problem. Once you have determined your research paradigm, you are able to establish the approach and methodology that is best suited to examine the knowledge you are interested in. This is why it is important to understand your research paradigm. It will improve the quality of your research.
Okay, so I hope that brought it a bit together. She did start to talk about some things that we'll talk about in the next section. But yeah, I hope that we see that ontology really is this our understanding about reality or the nature of reality, and then epistemology is about how we come to know about it or how we think that nature, our reality should be examined. Okay. All right. So she touched on the video, sort of started to present to us the concept of paradigms, and paradigms, of course, being the once you add your ontology, which is the nature of reality, and your epistemology together, you get your paradigm, or generally your general approach to not just research, but to life. All of us have different approaches to life, right? So yeah, there are 3 dominant approaches to research we'll look at quickly, and each approach, as we've seen, will have a certain epistemology and a certain ontology, right? So the positive approach is the first one, and positivists believe that social reality can be discovered. That is, that there's a systematic way of doing research that emphasizes the importance of observable facts. So essentially, the positives are saying that something in society or a social reality, it can be studied, right? It's not this thing that's super complex. It can be studied in a very systematic way. So yes, it can be studied in a very systematic way, and I'll give us, so the positivists would be people like the natural scientists, right? They are positivists because they believe there's sort of a systematic way that we can come to know about society. So if I want to figure out why this person is sick, I can conduct certain experiments and certain tests in a very systematic and very structured way to get to the core, to the root of why is this person sick, right? So those are the positivists, the natural scientists, where things are very black and white. And then we've got the interpretive approach, and interpretivists argue that social reality is inherently meaningful. It is an approach to social science that emphasizes the importance of insiders' viewpoints to understanding social realities. So they're telling us that, okay, social reality isn't just something that can be discovered using, these very systematic, almost very objective processes, but it is something that we need to sort of try to understand the meaning of it from individuals, right? So the interpreters are saying social reality depends on the interpretation of a particular person, which means I can have a certain interpretation of marriage. Razia may have a different interpretation of marriage, and the interpretivists are saying none of it is wrong. Each one is just, each one is right in its own context and in its own space, if that makes sense. So it's quite relative. It's this idea that truth is relative, right? And we've been seeing this paradigm, I think, especially now. There's this idea that, there's no one truth. Everyone has their own truth. So the positivists are saying, no, there's only one truth. 1 + 1 is equal to 2. That's it. We can measure that. We can sort of really systematically see how that comes together. The interpretivists are saying 1 + 1 can be 2 for Lauren, but 1 + 1 can be 3 for us, yeah. And none of them are wrong. It just means for them, 1 + 1, it means something else, right? So truth is relative. There's no one truth. Each people have their own truth, because and I think the basis of this is they saying that I can't tell you what to feel. I can't tell you how to interpret your reality, because I don't live in your reality. I can't tell you that you mustn't feel bad if someone calls you a particular name, because it's not a big deal. I can't tell you that because I'm not living in your reality, right? If you tell me this thing that this person says hurt me, then we need to take that as truth for you. That's your truth, right? The next person might hear the same thing and say, I don't really care, right? So I hope that's clear. The interpretivists are really looking at how do you make sense of your social reality? How do you interpret it? And then the critical approach, critical social sciences are arguing that social reality is multi-layered. So it's an approach to social science that emphasizes, the need to uncover hidden processes and structures within society. So the critical social sciences are basically coming with almost like a magnifying glass on social reality and saying there's more than meets the eye. So, okay, so if, for example, the concept of marriage, right? The positivists will say, okay, marriage can be looked at as, this plus this, two families coming together. These two people decide that they're going to, spend the rest of their lives together. Done. We observe it. We can see how it comes together. Cool. Interpretivists are saying marriage means different things to different people. For some people, it's about the intimacy. For some people, it's about the financial gain. And so whatever it means to each person is fine. That's the interpreter. The critical scientists are coming and saying, but is marriage really useful? Is marriage really a good thing? Let's put a microscope. Is it a micro? What's a magnifying glass? Sorry. Let's put a magnifying glass on this institution of marriage and see why it is the way it is. Who is it really benefiting? And so you can think of the critical social sciences almost as that guy in class who's always trying to pick a fight, who's always trying to argue with the lecturer about a certain thing, right? Because they're like, is it really? But why? Who is it serving? And they'll dig deeper and usually they'll come up with something like, well, marriage actually as an institution is, a patriarchal institution. It is put in place to serve men, to disadvantage women, based on this. So it is important to note that all of these approaches aren't just coming and just saying things, right? They are coming with facts. They are, of course, researchers. So they are, being critical and they are being systematic in the way that they present their information. It's just that they look at things very differently. So I hope that is clear. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Okay, it's a lot to take in. But what I want to know, does that not affect everything we've just done? Like if you think of the standards and norms and all of that, doesn't that create a sense of bias almost already? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do, because if a reviewer has a certain paradigm, is that what you mean? If I'm coming in with an interpretivist paradigm, that affects the way I'm going to review an article, right? Yeah. Is that what you mean? I think no, because ultimately, despite the approach that I'm taking, despite the paradigm that I employ, the scientific norms are still asking me to be objective, to look at it based on the merit, based on the facts, not based on my individual paradigm as a researcher. So that's why it almost asks you to, yes, you sort of have recognized your approach and your paradigm, but when you are reviewing academic text, or when you're reviewing research, you need to sort of put that aside and just look at the research based on merit. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
So again, sorry, but
no,
again, just kind of understand it for me. I would if I'm putting forward research, I would choose one of those 3 approaches before I even decided what it is. Like that would already decide for me the way that I'll do my research.
Yes, it would. You already sort of come in with that, and usually it is also informed by the field that you're in, right? So it's very rare to find a social scientist who takes on a positivist approach, because usually in social science, our psychology and sociology type of subjects, we don't say that there's only one way of understanding things. As a psychologist, you don't just say if a person presents with this behavior, it must be that they suffer from this thing. There are usually always options. It could be this, it could be that. And I think that's because in the social science, we are dealing with people. And so people, it's very difficult to put people in a black and white box, right? So yeah, it is sort of informed also by your discipline already. You won't find
medical nature.
Sorry?
People doing research of medical nature, would they be positivist?
They would be positivist, yeah.
I see, I understand now. Okay.
Yeah, and then the critical approach you would find also in social science, but it's usually those who are looking at more higher level stuff in the social science, so more your economists, more your political scientists, as opposed to your sociologists and your psychologists who are looking at more individual type of stuff. Okay. All right. So yeah, I would encourage that you would go back and reread those sections, especially around the approaches. There are some others that are presented in your notes. I think it's like the feminist approach, and so some other contemporary approaches. It will be good to just read through those and get an understanding of it. But I just wanted us to highlight the main ones. Yeah, the dominant approaches. Okay, so I think that's it for today, and we lovely made it sort of just on in time. Are there any questions at this point? We have 2 minutes. Are we all happy with sort of what we covered today? And yeah, very complicated. Oh, I didn't see that comment.
Okay, continue more. I understand it now.
Okay, okay, cool.
You explained it, that the video just confused me.
Oh, did the video confuse you?
Yes. That is okay. I understand now.
Okay, great. Sorry. Sometimes I think the video will do better and then it doesn't. But okay, I'm glad that it comes together now. Again, I think just giving it another read will really, I think, cement it. There are lots of nice examples in the notes that you can also just refer to. Okay, so I think that's it for today. Next week we will look at the next unit, and yeah, I think that's it. If you have not completed the attendance register, I'm going to just pop it in the chat again before we go. And yeah, with that, I wish you all a lovely evening and a great weekend. Please stay warm if you are in Cape Town. It's it was pouring today. So yeah, please stay warm, have a good weekend, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.